Most lifters believe that if they simply keep applying progressive overload, muscle growth will continue indefinitely. They add a little bit more weight, they do a few more reps, they push harder, and for some time, this actually works. The muscles grow, the strength increases, and progress simply seems automatic. But then something strange happens. After months or sometimes years, the progress suddenly stops. The weight stops increasing, the muscles stop growing, and many lifters begin to think they have reached their natural limit. But in the most cases, this is not a real reason. Today, I want to explain why progressive overloads eventually stops producing results and how intelligent lifters continue progressing for decades. For the ones new to my channel, I'm Dr. Nash Jocic, former bodybuilding champion. I have been in bodybuilding for over 40 years, and during that time I competed 46 times and won 17 titles. I have also trained personally over 3,500 clients and helped them to get in the best shape of their lives. In the meantime, I have published 12 ebooks which are fully loaded with everything that you always wanted to know about bodybuilding. So if you want to deepen your knowledge and widen your horizons, simply click on that link in the comments and you can download my ebooks. So let us dive into the topic and let me answer the first big question, and this is why progressive overload works so well in the beginning. When somebody starts lifting weights, the body experiences completely new stimulus. Muscles are exposed to tension like never before, and the nervous system starts adapting, motor unit recruitment increases, and coordination also increases. So people simply learn how to exercise better. In other words, the body becomes more efficient at producing force. And this is why beginners often gain strength very quickly. During the first few months of training, lifters can often add weight almost every week. I've experienced that on myself and also with so many clients that I've trained. And in first few months, beginners simply keep adding weights every week. And it seems as the progress will continue automatically and it's simply unstoppable. But this early phase can be misleading because many people simply believe that progress should always continue in a straight line, meaning you add a little bit more weight, muscles grow. Then you add more weight, then muscles continue to grow. But unfortunately, the body doesn't work that way forever. So let me tell you a few words now about the adaptation principle. So the human body is incredibly efficient in adapting to repeated stress. In fact, adaptation is the fundamental survival mechanism for the body. If a stimulus is repeated often enough, the body becomes more efficient in handling it. And this is exactly what happens in training. So when you perform the same exercises with the same loads in the same rep range, week after week, your body gradually becomes adapted to that stimulus. And once adaptation occurs, the training stress no longer creates the same signal for growth. And probably many of you have experienced the same situation. I have experienced that in my early stages as well. But that doesn't mean that exercises has stopped working completely. But it does mean that the growth stimulus has weakened. At this stage, many lifters believe that the solution is simply to continue increasing the weight. And this is obviously not the way out, and this leads to the next problem. And this problem is the overload trap. When the progress slows down, most lifters respond in the same way. They start pushing harder to increase the load. They force heavier weights because this is the logic, isn't it? You more weights, more muscles. Stronger you are, bigger the muscles. But this is not physiologically true. They chase numbers instead of quality. But this often leads to several problems. Like, for example, the form starts to deteriorate. When you start constantly pushing for heavier weights, now the most important target for you is to lift heavier, but not necessarily in the same or in the best possible form. Also, the range of motion becomes shorter. People who constantly try to lift heavier, you have seen it, I've seen it, I see it every day in the gym. The range of motion becomes shorter because in order to lift heavier, you cannot perform any more full range of motion, especially in that perfect form, which is 1 to 2 seconds up and 2 seconds down, which will take you 4 seconds to complete a perfect rep, which will again have to be full range of motion. Now, when you start chasing weights, that goes out of the window. So you simply start cutting corners. You start performing shorter reps. Also, momentum replaces tension. How often did you see that people, in order to lift heavier in squats, they start bouncing? The same happens when they do bench press. They bounce the bar from the chest in order to lift heavier. So momentum replaces tension. And instead of training for muscle stimulation more effectively, they simply start lifting heavier weights. In other words, the transition goes from training for hypertrophy to training for strength performances. And this is very, very different. So I also did a video on this subject. And if you're interested to understand this more in detail, you can watch that video, because strength training is not bodybuilding training. Remember that. Muscle growth depends primarily on mechanical tension applied to the muscle fibers, not simply to amount of the weight that you have lifted. You can create more mechanical tension with lighter weights if the force is applied correctly through proper time and attention. So this distinction is extremely important. Now let me tell you a few words about mechanical tension versus load. Many people believe that automatically lifting heavier means more muscle stimulation, but this is not always true. And consider two different lifters performing the same exercise. One lifter performing with heavy weights quickly with a partial range of motion. Another lifter uses lighter weights but does the full range of motion, perfect form, and causes stronger muscular contraction. So which lifter do you think places more tension on the muscle? In many cases, it is the second lifter. Mechanical tension doesn't depend only on load, but muscle control, time and attention, contraction quality, and fatigue accumulation. And this is why experienced bodybuilders often continue building muscle even when their strength increases very slowly. I've seen so many professional bodybuilders. I know loads of them. I train with many of them. And if progressive overload was simply adding weights, these people will be probably lifting houses or trucks. But that doesn't happen, because that constant increase in weight will have to stop somewhere. And how then these people progress further? I have just explained to you, and the main reason is mechanical tension. So you can increase mechanical tension even if you use the same weight, but doing better form, doing slower reps, or doing more reps with the same weight. So remember this, because it's a fundamental difference between training for mechanical tension, hence hypertrophy, and strength training. So let me explain to you how the plateau mechanism works. When progressive overload stops producing visible results, several physiological factors are usually involved. So the number one factor is stimulus familiarity. The body becomes accustomed to the same training stimulus. The second is accumulated fatigue. Months of intense training can create hidden fatigue in the nervous system and connective tissues. And even if the muscles feel recovered, the overall system may not be functioning at full capacity, and this will obviously stop you growing. Now, the third factor is connective tissue limitations. Muscles can adapt relatively quickly, but tendons, ligaments, and joints adapt much slower to the stress that you apply in your workouts. And this structure often becomes the limiting factor in long-term progression. And this is why many experienced lifters eventually experience elbow irritation. Often people come and complain to me about tennis elbow. Oh, my elbow is hurting from this way, from that way. What can I do? What did I do wrong? Well, more often than not, shoulder discomfort, so bursa impingement, which is so common, and also knee pain. So these three situations are so common simply because of the reasons that I just explained to you, and they are actually causing that plateau to happen. Let me just remind you once again, there are three factors. First factor is stimulus familiarity. The second is accumulated fatigue. And the third factor is connective tissue limitation. One of the biggest misunderstandings in training is that progress should constantly evolve in straight line. In reality, muscles grow in cycles. So periods of rapid progress are often followed by slower phases. And this is normal. There is nothing wrong with it. Experienced lifter understands that progress occurs in waves. Now, new stimulation is required because once you are adapted to a particular type of stimulation, you need to do something different in order to cause new stimulation and therefore new adaptation or the next wave of muscle growth. Let me tell you a few words now about the role of exercise variation. Another reason why progressive overload stops is that the body becomes extremely efficient in exact movement pattern that you are repeating. When you perform the same exercises for months or years, your nervous system becomes extremely efficient in adapting to that stress. The muscles still work, but stimulus become more predictable and less demanding. This is very important to understand because body basically protects itself but by adapting to particular type of stress and makes it easier for itself to continue to do the same thing again. And this is where intelligent exercise variation becomes useful. But this doesn't mean that you should be changing your exercises every week. Random variation destroys the ability to track progress. Instead, variation should be strategic and occasional. For example, if you have performed chest workouts, always starting with barbell bench press and then incline barbell press and then dips. Now the change doesn't have to be different exercises, but you can, for example, change the barbell bench press with the dumbbell bench press. You can change incline barbell press with dumbbell incline press, or you can change dips with a decline press. So these changes are again going to be a new stimulus. So you didn't change exercises, you just changed the variation of this exercise. Another type of change, which is very, very effective, and you have probably experienced that, is that you change the order of exercises. So instead of always starting with barbell bench press, you may start with dumbbell incline press and then continue with decline press and do bench press, barbell bench press as the third exercise. Again, the exercises are still there, they're all the same, and but the order is different. When I do that with my clients, they come next day and they say, oh, my chest is so sore. I don't know what happened. I said, what happened? We have changed the order of exercises. So this particular change should be done in order to refresh the stimulus. You're not changing exercises, but you're changing the order or you're changing the variations. You are using different variation, for example, of bench press or incline presses. And also, you cannot do this every week. You don't change this every week. So once you feel that your body has adapted and that you're not responding to your workouts, which are actually very good, you may change the order of exercises or you can apply different variations of the same exercises. And you should keep then this new strategy for another 2, 3, 4 months. You can't just keep changing every week. So you need to allow the body to adapt to the new stress. And when or if you reach that plateau again, you can revert to your previous selection of exercises and variations, and also the same order. Or you can go for the third different option, which will be a different order of exercises again and maybe different variations. But very important to understand, you don't do this every week. When you change something, you stay for a few months, 3 months, 4 months, maybe even 6 months, as long as this new order and variation of exercises simply works. Now, there is another way of changing your workouts in order to refresh the stimulus. So experienced bodybuilders may not even change the exercises. They do the same exercise, they do barbell bench press, barbell incline press and dips, but they change something else. They change, for example, the tempo of exercising. So instead of doing every rep in 3 seconds, they try to do in 4 or 5 seconds. This is, again, very, very different change and very, very impactful change. Also, the number of reps. So if you're doing mainly 6 to 10 reps, maybe you should start thinking about doing anywhere from 10 to 12, maybe 15 reps. So you increase the number of reps. So you either increase the tempo, the time under tension, or you can increase the number of sets. Also, you may lower the weights a little bit and do more sets. This is another way to refresh the stimulus. You're still doing the same exercises, nothing changes, but you are approaching your workouts differently. So everything that I've just mentioned causes a slightly different stimulus and actually gets you of that plateau trap. So the most important lesson that you can take from this video is that progressive overload is not a simple formula that works forever in the same way. So it's not just aiming to lift heavier every week, but there are other ways of increasing intensity and making that progressive overload to be continuously effective. So trying to avoid these stagnation periods or plateaus. So simply adding weights is not the full story. The long-term progression also involves intelligent programming, high-quality repetitions, proper recovery, and gradual adjustment to training stimulus. When all these factors are combined, muscle growth can continue for many, many years. So let me tell you good news. I have prepared for you something new, something extremely valuable and important, and this is the full bodybuilding blueprint course, in which I demonstrate and explain the most effective exercises for all muscle groups. The course is made of 8 different videos and is going to be available this week. So if you're interested, this is something very new. Nobody has done it so far, and you will benefit greatly by learning from me how to perform the most effective exercises for all muscle groups. And obviously, if you're interested, you can download this course from my website. Again, let me remind you that I have published 12 ebooks for you, which are fully loaded with everything you always wanted to know about muscle growth, fat loss, training splits, number of sets, number of reps, nutrition, lifestyle change, and much, much more. So if you're interested in expanding your knowledge and finally start growing muscles and losing body fat, simply click on the link in the comments and you can download my ebooks. I would also like you to watch this video in which I introduce my other services, actually the ways that I can help you personally one-to-one to get in the best shape of your life. And these services are personalized training programs, personalized nutritional programs, telephone consultations, online coaching, and for people who live in London, personal training one-to-one. So guys, if you have enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, like the video, share the video, and also send me your comments. And until the next video, I wish you all the best.